Good morning, dear educators from all over the world, from China, from Australia, from the States, from the different countries in the continent of America, from Europe, from the Middle East. Welcome today to our 15th webinar hosted by Huan Quan Village. 15 webinars until now, and Huan Quan Village will continue to host webinars always to make sure that we share all this important information with all our different educators worldwide, because we believe in the sacred mission of education and will continue to serve this mission of education. We are honored to have all of our educators with us today, and we especially welcome today, of course, to our great speakers, internationally acclaimed workshop leaders and educational experts, Mr. Fouad Sila and Ms. Aleen Nassim. Today's topic is going to be the 5 pillars of differentiation. Welcome, Ms. Aleen, and welcome, Mr. Fouad. Ms. Aleen Nassim is an experienced English language, social studies, and civics international educator and academic middle manager. She has more than 13 years of experience in generating and implementing new differentiated strategies within student-centered classrooms without borders. She is an expert in a student-servant leadership approach that she implemented in her career while guiding many facilitators within the journey of the sacred mission of education. Ms. Aleen designed dozens of curricula based on the multi-layered curriculum and one subject called knowledge approaches, tackling the American, British, and IB programs. Last but not least, Ms. Aleen is an acclaimed international workshop leader. She conducted many online and offline workshops worldwide. Mr. Fouad Sila is an international experienced English language, social studies, and civics educator and middle manager. He has more than 15 years of experience in co-founding IB and American program schools, and in workshop leading and generating new pedagogical approaches and differentiated strategies. Mr. Fouad is the co-creator of the Multilayered Curriculum, CC Differentiation, and one subject called Knowledge Approaches and Methodologies. He conducted many international offline and online education workshops and designed many curricula. Last but not least, his scope of expertise tackles American, Finnish, IB, and British programs. Welcome, Ms. Aleen, and welcome, Mr. Fouad, for our 15th webinar today, hosted by Huan Quan Village. And welcome all our educators from all over the world to this 15th webinar. Again, we are honored to have you today. It's a great honor for us to have you all today. The first question I'm going to ask, of course, please make sure you are all on muted mode, dear educators, so that you enjoy the webinar. And during the webinar, you can post your questions in the Zoom chat box. And later at the end of the webinar, our 2 speakers, guest speakers, they'll be more than happy to answer all your questions related to the 5 pillars of differentiation. Ms. Aleen, my first question is for you. Why do educators, teachers, of course, we call them now facilitators, in general, complain about enormous difficulties they face while trying to differentiate?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Mr. John, for this honoring presentation or welcoming for us. I am pleased and honored to be here amongst all these educators. I hope whatever we have to deliver today would be up to their expectations. To start off with your first question, Mr. John, I need to go through a few facts, which I think everyone around us here and with us in this webinar will not be able to deny. Starting, first of all, differentiation and how difficult it is to many teachers today. Well, actually, if we look at this picture, is this how they see differentiation? Is this how I used to see differentiation, or anyone amongst us here? Well, if this is here, this is the case, like this poor teacher expresses it with his question seriously? Like he's using all his limbs just to cater to the needs of a couple or a few students. So if this is how differentiation looks in the eyes or in the viewpoint of those teachers, then definitely it's something challenging and extremely hard, if I'm not going to say impossible at many times. Another scenario is this one. This educator who is in a classroom with all these kids and all their needs are reflected in these bubbles. Plus, on top of all this, we can notice that she's carrying a document which says more budget cuts. So what do I know about this teacher or educator? The question that she would ask simply will be, how am I supposed to differentiate instruction when I have all this going on around me? Yes, I am competent. Yes, I'm intelligent, but I'm overworked and I am expecting more budget cuts. So her normal reaction will be this: how am I supposed to differentiate instruction? So don't we all agree that this is a normal reaction from all our teachers? Well, if I have to go again to this famous illustration that every single professional development session that we have related to differentiated instruction, we get it there as a motivation. But let me look at it. Let's look at it together and examine exactly what's going on in this illustration. The instructor is sitting relaxed, comfortable behind his seat. He's not even bothered to do any kind of effort. And then for fair selection, he says, everybody must have the same instruction or same exam, which is, please climb that tree. Now, if you examine all the facial expressions and the body language of the attendees, who are supposed to be the students in our classroom, there's only one who is extremely happy. And definitely it's this one, the monkey. It's his field of expertise. This instruction, please climb that tree, only caters to this individual. What about the others? Look at the dog, look at the seal, the fish, or pathetic. And the elephant, the penguin with its body language as well. This is the simple, normal reaction for every student in my classroom when they get the same instructions. I don't want to only limit this to students. I used to be a student, but now I am an educator, a teacher, a facilitator, and an admin as well. But did I go through this? Yes. Do I still go through this? Yes, because in many professional development sessions, even me as a teacher, I represent a student here. So if I don't get myself differentiated instructions, then definitely I will suffer. So why should we get differentiated instruction? What's differentiation anyway? According to this article by Gary Coleman Tucker, she defined it in a very appealing way for us, which all of us are familiar with. It's a teaching approach that tailors instruction to all students' learning needs. All the students have the same learning goal. We design everything to meet that learning goal. But the instruction should vary based on what? Students' interests, preferences, strengths, and struggles. Instead of teaching in a way of lecturing the whole group, the whole class, as it used to be in the previous years, until now there are a few who are still doing it, a teacher uses a bunch of different methods. This can include teaching students in small groups, or it also includes one-on-one sessions. Students also should have multiple options for not only taking information, for making sense of the ideas, and thus expressing what they learn also in different and multiple options. This was said by the educator Carol Ann Tomlinson. So why then differentiation is fair for us to adopt and adapt to? Simply because it leads to success. Success doesn't come only when everyone gets the same thing. It only comes for everybody to get what they need, and that will make them successful. And it will also make us delivering the content successful. So it's not only success from one side. So differentiation also was targeted by this very insightful educator, Mr. Chester Finn, and he really illustrated it in an amazing manner. Why did he tackle this issue? According to Jennifer Osborne in her article, where it says how differentiation became a dirty word to teachers. Differentiation has become a dirty word, but why? Mr. Chester Finn just noticed or compared it to. He said he noted that teachers are being given an all but impossible assignment akin to presenting a general practitioner physician with 23 patients who manifest different symptoms, different degrees of illness, and upon examination, very different ailments. So the comparison here is teachers to general practitioner doctors. The difference is that this doctor was faced with 23, which is, let's say, ideally 20 to 23 or 24 students is what we expect in a classroom. But our teachers are faced with more than 23 and more than 25 students. And all these individually, they have their own different symptoms, different illnesses, and so on. They definitely require different ailments. So he continued by saying, over the years, he's seen teachers, when speaking to audiences of teachers, I've noted that any suggestion that differentiated instruction works better in theory than in reality usually elicits applause, or at minimum, a knowing and somewhat cynical chuckle. In theory, it's amazing. It's ideal, utopia. But what is happening here actually on the ground? Well, he says many of them do applause when we say it's theoretically ideal, but practically, most of them just give us a cynical chuckle. So why do they give us that cynical chuckle? Here comes the answer to our main question, Mr. John. Yes. Why is it almost impossible for our teachers or all teachers basically to differentiate and have it as by default strategy? There are 5 reasons. Class size, I did mention this earlier. Usually, ideally, a classroom should have 20 students. What we end up having now is a classroom of 28 up to, unfortunately, I'm so sad to say this, to 40 students in one classroom. And it's not only that, what's more saddening is that these numbers can be found for foundational stages like grade 1s and grade 2 students. So how can I imagine such a class will help or aid a teacher to differentiate? Professional staff. A teacher cannot differentiate on her own. With such a number of students in one classroom, definitely she needs a classroom assistant. But is this what's happening now? Because of the cut budget, as we did refer to earlier in that image, many schools can't afford having more than the teacher in the classroom. So how can that happen smoothly? In addition to having a classroom assistant, teachers should collaborate, and they cooperate and collaborate in order to design activities and plan lessons so that the implementation happens smoothly. But again, because of cut budget, those teachers are overworked. They are overburdened with other responsibilities to the extent that they don't have the time slot where they can do the designing and the planning accordingly. What about the resources? Again, we go to cut budget. Many materials are missing. But again, even if there are no cut budget and we have a lot of materials and resources there to aid the teachers, and a teacher is overworked or overburdened, definitely they will not have that enough time for the quality preparation, planning, designing their lessons for differentiation and instructions. So again, we've seen these are very crucial here, very crucial in preparing and developing the teacher's skills to differentiate smoothly and instinctively. Administrative support, yes, they give us many professional development sessions and everything seemed well, but then when it comes to reality, everything that looked once organized becomes organized chaos, and it's not properly implemented. And I don't want to say most of the times, but many times we face those who deliver such workshops lack the experience in such a field. So whatever they teach us, whatever they lecture us, falls short in many aspects. The final and very important factor that will help everyone deliver or adopt differentiation techniques and styles easily is parental support. Just like I need my two hands to clap, we as a school or educational institution, definitely that's one hand. The other hand is the parents. If we do not get them involved in what is happening at school and explain to them in details the infrastructure of how differentiation goes on, and then they continue or complement our work at home, then this will be only one-sided and definitely we will be limping. So therefore, if we consider all these, then we will know why teachers today face such a problem and consider differentiation as something stumping and challenging, Mr. John. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, it was a very detailed and infrastructured answer. Thank you very much, Ms. Aleen. And I want to ask now, Mr. Fouad, how can we remove, is there a way to remove the cynical chuckle from our dear educators and dear teachers and facilitators? And how then, Mr. Fouad, to effectively and systematically differentiate so as to establish and maintain a 21st century lifelong learning environment? The important how that I am sure that today you will give us the answer for that. Welcome, Mr. Fouad. The floor is all yours. We cannot hear you, Mr. Fouad.
Unmute, Mr. Fouad.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Again, thank you, Mr. John, for the introduction, and welcome to everyone who's attending, fellow educators from all over the world. Regarding your question, I will, or to answer your question, I'll go back to a very basic notion in education. And that is a notion that all educators around the world are familiar with, and that is the education triad, which consists of the learner, the facilitator, and the curriculum. Basically, who is learning, who is teaching, and what material, what the content that is being taught. This triad has been around since, I don't know when, but for a long time. This is the basis of education. A question arises now, what are the features of the education triad in the 21st century? Okay, this has been around for a very long time. But in the 21st century, should this triad have anything special about it? Well, yes. For the 21st century, the learner, regarding the learner, the first and most important element in the triad, so when it comes to the learner, we need to focus on the 21st century learner's traits. As for the facilitator, well, The facilitator also has a set of traits appropriate for the 21st century. And as for the curriculum, the 21st century curriculum should be a comprehensive curriculum. Another question: what is the link between the 21st century education triad and differentiation? Well, I'll discuss each of the three elements of the triad in details and answer this question: the relation between 21st century education triad and differentiation. Starting with the learners, the 21st century learner traits. What are those traits? Now, different sources describe the 21st century learners traits using different terms. What matters most is that these traits are crucial to develop a 21st century lifelong learner. Regardless of how those traits are described, essentially they are the following. A 21st century learner should be or should have the following traits: independent lifelong learning, positive and critical thinking, innovation and problem solving, principled leadership, a focused and confident mindset, curious and adventurous exploration, international-minded citizenship, environmental activism, team spirit, character, creative artistry, wellness and health promotion, cultural harmony, advocacy, and communicative inquiry. You can see them in front of you. And I'm sure you've noticed that these traits are quite varied. They're on top of being numerous, obviously. And they're numerous and varied because these traits reflect diverse needs, diverse interests, diverse abilities of individual learners. With such a diversity, differentiation is needed. What about the facilitators' traits in the 21st century? Now, in the 21st century, a facilitator should develop a set of traits. Why? Well, he or she should do that so that he or she can develop the 21st century's learner's trait. So the facilitator's traits are there, and this is a very important notion to keep in mind, are there so that he or she would be able to establish and nurture the learner's traits. Now, what are those facilitator's traits? Kindness, care and compassion, passion for education, communication skills, a focused and confident mindset, forward thinking, strong rapport with students, tech savviness or technology savviness, engaging and facilitating personality, fairness and equity, lifelong learning, flexibility and adaptability. Now, all these traits obviously are very essential for any facilitator to have, because without such an infrastructure, if I may use that term, I mean, the facilitator cannot do his or her job, cannot really be a 21st century facilitator. But these traits are not enough. The cherry on top, perhaps the most important trait, is in-depth pedagogical knowledge. And I made sure that I highlighted this one because I'm sure you agree with me that no matter how kind, or caring and compassionate the facilitator is, or how tech savvy he or she is, all the other traits, unless he or she has an in-depth pedagogical knowledge, all the other traits would be of little use. Again, numerous traits, various traits. And as I said earlier, those traits are there so that they foster, they nurture, they help establish and maintain the 21st century learners' traits. With that in mind, and with an in-depth pedagogical knowledge of the 21st century education, surely the facilitator needs to resort to differentiation. As for the third element of the education triad, the 21st century comprehensive curriculum, well, the 21st century curriculum needs to be comprehensive. It needs to take into account all the learning experiences of the students, which are intended learning experiences. What I mean by intended is that they are planned for, as opposed to accidental learning experiences. So a comprehensive and differentiated curriculum of the 21st century is the multi-layered curriculum. And this multi-layered curriculum, as I said, encompasses all intended learning experiences which students encounter inside and outside the classroom. Fellow educators who have attended our previous webinars, I'm sure by now are very familiar with the multi-layered curriculum. And for those who are perhaps hearing of this for the first time, of course, I'll be sharing it with everyone. The multi-curriculum is something like this. Obviously, the pie chart is just a graphical representation. What's most important about this, the multi-layered curriculum, is that, as I said, it encompasses all intended learning experiences which students encounter inside and outside the classroom. I'll go over each layer now to prove to you that the multi-layered curriculum is the 21st century comprehensive and differentiated curriculum. Starting with, and this doesn't necessarily mean that this should come first, because all these layers are of equal importance. But we usually start when introducing the multi-layered curriculum with the overt curriculum, the standards, because for most educators, once you mention the word curriculum, they will think of, oh, curriculum, yes, the standards. The standards are important. The curricula we're all familiar with, whether it's an American curriculum, a British curriculum, the national curriculum of any country, but those curricula do not encompass all intended learning experiences which students encounter inside and outside the classroom. The second important layer is IT integration. Remember, we're talking 21st century, particularly the summer model, which I'll talk about later. One subject called knowledge, which is the zenith, the peak, the apogee of horizontal integration, vertical integration, streams projects, co-curricular and extracurricular activities, 21st century lifelong learners' traits, which I discussed a couple of slides ago, classroom without borders, which was the topic of one of our previous webinars in which we discussed this in details, real life-based education, 21st century, parent-school partnership, and Ms. Aleen tackled one aspect of the importance of this layer when she was referring to, when she was talking about the main obstacles or the main elements that make the differentiation difficult. The goals of the educational authorities, and the last layer is local and international cultures and identities. Now, taken together, this multi-layered curriculum, taken together as a single unit, okay, it makes up a 21st century comprehensive and differentiated curriculum. We refer to it as the multi-layered curriculum. Okay, so far, what I've presented to you was more or less theoretical, really. Okay, you're I'm sure you agree with me. 21st century learners' traits are important. Facilitators' traits are important. This multi-layered curriculum model, which I presented, is important. But when it comes to our day-to-day work or endeavors as facilitators or as educators, how can we implement that? Well, for the differentiated curriculum or the multi-layered curriculum to be effectively implemented, for the facilitators to systematically differentiate their classes, and for the students to consistently receive differentiated learning experiences. Please note the words systematically and consistently, because we don't want, say, as facilitators to have, let's say, one session per week that is differentiated. No, we want every session, every class to be a differentiated class. Well, that's easier said than done. So for these three elements of the educational triad to be to use the 21st century education triad in order to apply a systematic and consistent differentiated classes, we need an easily applicable framework, and that framework is called the Curriculum Classroom Differentiation Framework, CC differentiation for short, which, as the name suggests, starts with a differentiated curriculum, which is the multi-layered curriculum that I have just introduced to you or reminded you of, eventually to get to the classroom. But between the curriculum and classroom, there are a few other steps that we have to take. We start, as I said, with the differentiated curriculum, the multi-layered curriculum. Then we move to the differentiated yearly plans, differentiated unit plans, differentiated weekly plans. Eventually, we would get to differentiated classes. In those differentiated classes, we would apply the 5 pillars of differentiation, which is the topic of today's webinar. One very important notion, though, to always keep in mind is that all the CC differentiation framework cannot be applied or cannot be put together and implemented by individual facilitators. It's impossible, really. I mean, it will take, you'll need more than 24 hours a day to plan and implement it. So input and feedback from all involved stakeholders, which include other facilitators, the students themselves, admins, parents, and the community as a whole. Input and feedback from all those stakeholders is essential for the curriculum classroom differentiation framework to be easily, or to be an easily applicable framework. And that's my answer to your question, Mr. John.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fouad, for this detailed description and answer, and giving the solution to make us out of the cynical chuckle and make sure that our facilitators are going to have an instinctive differentiated environment, and not just, as you said, once a week. We're doing differentiation twice a week, so it must be instinctively within. We must have the student differentiated, student-centered differentiated classroom must be an instinctive process, and not just we make it up. That's why you gave us all those elements to make it distinctive. Thank you very much, Mr. Fouad. And I'm going to ask now a question, and let's, Ms. Aleen, if you can briefly describe for us the 5 pillars. And we are always coming with the 4 pillars. We don't know what this 5th pillar is. So please, Ms. Aleen, if you can describe us the 5 pillars of differentiation.
Thank you again, Mr. John, for this question. And thank you, Mr. Fouad, for laying out the infrastructure for the CC differentiated curriculum and showing us the triad. Now, of course, we've been preaching a lot about differentiation and how essential and how fair it should be implemented. And as you've mentioned, many of us are familiar with the 4 pillars of differentiation. And the 5th one actually was, as we're going to see now in depth, was kind of embedded in the fourth one that we normally know. Well, the ones that we're familiar with are differentiating the content, the process, the product, and environment. Now, the fifth one is differentiation by emotions. And this is what we're going to focus most on today. But again, it's not something which has been not noticed. It was, but it wasn't highlighted as a separate entity by itself, and how influential it works. How influential it is on our process and delivery of lessons or approach towards students. It was embedded in the environment differentiation section. So let's talk briefly about each one, and then we will hit on the emotions part in depth. Of course, when we talk about content, as Mr. Fouad said, we are not going to be able to teach or facilitate any kind of learning if we don't have some kind of resources, a curricula, resources, books, projects, videos, documentaries. So whatever the students need to learn, these are the resources, these form our content. Again, if I have to talk about differentiation by content, then definitely I don't follow a rigid curriculum, because as we have seen so far, we have levels in our classes, which means in my curriculum, no matter which curriculum I'm following, I do have those standards that take me either a level below or a level higher. So when I differentiate in content, then I have to cater to the needs of my students by hitting on whatever he missed or whatever he needs to progress because he had mastered the on-level standards. So this is differentiation by content. Now, how am I going to deliver or present these sources or content? This happens through the process. It's whatever the students need that will help them learn this content. That's how I should present my work. So, for example, if my students are visual learners, then I have to focus more on images, illustrations, creating even mental images and videos, and even taking them to see and experiment live. So the process is, this is one example, of course. We've got many others based on the students' preferences, interests, and capabilities and abilities. Definitely, as I mentioned at the beginning, when I differentiate and I want my learning goal to be achieved by my student, and I have differentiated my content and my process, I have to evaluate how effectively did I differentiate. And this will appear in the product of the students. So when I give them different options that cater to their needs, and I see what they have learned, manifested, or illustrated, demonstrated in any way of product that makes them feel comfortable, and then it was manifested in a right way, targeting all the goals that I have been planning for, then yes, I'm definitely sure that I did differentiate properly. Otherwise, we have to revisit and then cater new activities in order to make this learning goal achieved. Now, the environment is a very important factor. How can I teach or facilitate learning when in my classroom, my kids are bored, when I have bullying going on, chaos? So again, I have to know the quality of my students. I have to put them in groups when necessary. I have to give them one-on-one instructions whenever that is best needed. And this is how I create a very safe environment for them to work peacefully. At the same time, the rapport, the trust, how they feel towards their teacher, how the teacher feels towards them. These are all like vibes that are being accepted or received by both teachers and their students. Once I establish and I enhance this comfortable zone for my students to work in properly, then yes, I have a very safe place to implement my differentiation style. Only then I can say I become a facilitator, not a controller or micromanager, So this plays a very important role in having my students getting motivated to do the work. When I come to emotions, which is the very crucial pillar in differentiation, I will be talking more about my brain and everyone's brain. This is related to the limbic system, which is a group of interconnected structures which are located within our brain, deep within our brain. The most important part is this. It's the part of the brain that's responsible for behavioral and emotional responses. So I think you can see the link now between environment and emotions, behavioral, emotional responses, and then what environment does that lead to? In depth, what is my limbic system responsible for? The limbic system, according to this article here, combines higher mental functions and primitive emotions into a single system, often referred to as the emotional nervous system. It's not only responsible for our emotional lives, but also for our higher mental functions, which are learning and formation of memories. It's very interesting. I came to know about this system while I was having a conversation, a friendly conversation with a colleague and a friend. And it clicked in my brain that how effective would the limbic system, or the center that controls and generates all the emotions and memories and link them together, how would this affect my own understanding of differentiating by emotions? We said it's deep within our brain. This is the limbic system and its components. If we check each one and read more about it, for example, this cingulate cortex, it is a component of the limbic system that is involved in emotional and cognitive processing. The thalamus is the one that relays information from the sensory organs to the cerebral cortex. The hypothalamus is the part of the forebrain which regulates the amount of fear, thirst, and other kinds of feelings. The hippocampus plays a very important role in our learning, memory, and ability to compare sensory information to expectation. Amygdala influences our motivation, emotional control, fear responses, and interpretation of nonverbal emotional expressions. In short, what are we trying to say here? Simply, my students use their 5 senses in order to receive all the signals that we give them, which are external signals, stimuli. But then these go into the brain and they are processed, memories are being formed, and these memories are linked with specific incidents or responses from an external stimulus. And these are left there as memories on the long run. How many times have you stood there wondering why whenever I smell this odor or this perfume, I remember a specific incident from my past? Simply, this explains it. My 5 senses play a very important role in forming memories and forming also behaviors. So if in my classroom, I differentiate by emotions and I show my students, and it is there written on my face, in my body language, that I really care for them. I am interested in their interests. I'm interested in their preferences. I care for them like a mother cares for her kids. Wouldn't that create such a memory and link it to either the sound of the voice or a facial expression or any kind of body language or even a name? And this will motivate the student to learn more. So for example, here I can see that the functions of the simply the limbic system are what? They control emotions to produce feelings, they interpret sensory impulses, they facilitate memory storage and retrieval, which is learning. It's a motivational system. If I have to explain this in a different way, modern day language, I'm just going to compare this to a classroom where I am a teacher, but at the same time, I'm going to act like a mother and my students are my kids. At the end of the day, this is their second home. Therefore, they're going to look at me and view me as their mother, that as a parent, whether a mom or a dad. If I observe closely what matters to each and every individual student, then definitely these will create memories in their limbic system, and these memories will never be forgotten. On the contrary, it will be used for them to accept everything that the teacher gives them willingly and happily. So I think this is a very important aspect, especially getting to be aware of the impact of differentiation by emotion on everyone, whether it's an adult or a kid or a teenager.
Thank you very much, Miss Aleen. Thank you. Really a very in detail description of showing why differentiation by emotion is, let's say, the pillar that drives all the other four pillars. And I want to ask now, Mr. Fouad, do you agree that differentiation by emotion has the strongest impact, and why?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Does differentiation by emotion have the strongest impact?
Yes.
Well, in short, yes. But a short answer like this one requires, well, more explanation. I'm sorry, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, go ahead, Mr. Fouad, we can see.
All right, okay. So, I'm sorry for this, but
No problem.
okay.
Okay, now.
So, what is the impact of differentiation by emotions on students' academic attainment? As I said, my short answer was yes, but to prove to you why I agree. Okay, looks like, again, I apologize for this,
No
but
problem.
it looks like my laptop is not responding.
There we go,
Okay.
it's working now.
All right. So first, I'll start by reminding everyone or informing everyone how emotions in education were viewed in the past and how they are viewed now. In the past, it was believed that learning was a rational process in which emotions did not play that big a role. The educators and other, let's say, people who are involved in education looked at learning as being a rational process that is involving reason, and they thought, you know, reason and emotions, you know, there's nothing really to connect them. Accordingly, intelligence, human intelligence, was measured using the IQ test. I'm sure we've all heard of the IQ test, but that was then. Now we know that emotions play a very important role in the learning process. They can either enhance it or impair it. Therefore, nowadays, instead of resorting to the IQ test, we resort to the EQ, or the emotional quotient, to get a more comprehensive and accurate understanding of human intelligence. Okay, so emotions are very important in the learning process. But what are the factors that affect emotions of students? It's a must that we understand and know what factors affect the emotions of the students, so that we know how to deal with those emotions. The factors that affect the emotions of students can be divided into two types: internal factors and external factors. The internal factors have to do with individual differences. The external factors can either be ones pertaining to the classroom and the school, or to the background and the environment of the student. Regarding individual differences, well, those can be genetic factors, personal preferences, academic anxiety, gender, and many other differences. All these individual differences are factors that affect the emotions of students. On the other hand, external factors, classroom and school, well, particularly curriculum content, instructional method, classroom environment, school environment, sense of belonging. And finally, the third type of factors is the background and environment, such as cultural background, the socioeconomic background of the student, and the home environment. Okay, so how do we deal with the emotions of the students? We've established that emotions are very important. I presented you with important, or the most important examples of the factors that affect their emotions, but how do we deal with the emotions of the students? Well, if you read any book on the topic, or even if you go online and look for methods to deal with, or ways to deal with the emotions of students, you will find countless hints and tips. But all of those can be really, or all of those are a reflection essentially of the 21st century facilitators traits, which I presented to you earlier. Because if a facilitator is kind, caring, and compassionate, if he or she has passion for education, I'm not going to go over all the skills again, but to help you make sense of how these traits can be applied. For instance, any person that is kind, caring, and compassionate would definitely, it would be instinctive for him or her to have empathy with another person. What if that person was a child and his or her student? If the facilitator has excellent communication skills, has a strong rapport with the students, has an engaging and a facilitating personality, is fair and treats students with fairness and equity, surely that facilitator would build a very strong bond with the students, and the students would feel comfortable to either open up, express their emotions to the facilitator, or maybe go to the facilitator and talk to him or her in person. So again, I can never stress enough how important these traits are, especially when dealing with the emotions of the students. If a facilitator really not just has those traits, but has those traits as second nature, okay, so they're very well developed, and the facilitator would instinctively act based on these traits, then dealing with the emotions would be second nature. As I said, it would come as an instinctive reaction. And this doesn't really matter whether you are a male teacher or a female teacher, whether you teach KG, primary, middle school, high school, whether you're an English teacher, language teacher, math teacher, science teacher. It doesn't matter what your or the student's background is. So all these factors don't matter as long as you have those traits dealing with the emotions of the students would be instinctive and would come as second nature to you, really. To sum things up, from the heart to the mind, because we're talking about differentiation by emotions, I'll quote Dr. Edward Mooney Jr., a famous educationist and author. Who said, "To reach a child's mind, first reach a child's heart." In other words, unless we make sure that every student is interested in and motivated about learning the way he or she prefers, which essentially means unless we differentiate by emotions, the effectiveness of all the work and all the effort that we put to differentiate by content, by process, by environment, I don't want to say would be wasted, but the effectiveness of all the effectiveness of trying to differentiate by the other four pillars would really be questionable. And well, I hope I answered your question.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Fouad.
John?
It was more an answer. It was a detailed answer and very detailed description. And I think now that all of our educators that already they believe in the emotion, now they are 100% convinced that differentiation by emotion is the pillar that drives all the other differentiation pillars. Yes.
And the key is this, the quote, to reach a child's mind, reach a child's heart first.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I need to intervene here,
yes,
Mr. John.
Please go ahead, Ms. Aleen.
Yeah.
Mr. Fouad has focused on from the heart to the mind, but based on what researchers and what we've unlocked about our inner brain, we have to say from the mind, from the brain to the mind, actually. It's not the real heart.
Yes.
Okay,
it has to be the figurative heart, actually.
Yes, the figurative heart. But yes, of course, we now know that all human emotions are really more or less, not more or less, but they are, yes, generated from the brain. It's certain chemicals that are secreted in the brain that create those emotions. So yes, I agree with Ms. Aleen. It's the figurative heart, not the physical heart.
Yes, I agree too. Thank you, Mr. Fouad and Ms. Aleen. Another question for you two, Ms. Aleen and Mr. Fouad. Can we today establish and nurture a one subject called knowledge, which is the strategy or the zenith of complete horizontal integration that we started it from 2012-13? The whole world, they want to reach that one subject called knowledge or the complete horizontal integration between subject without differentiation. Is it possible?
Actually, Mr. John, I would like to start here and say it's simply said impossible. And why? We need to prove this. So as we mentioned and as we've seen so far, we can never get to anyone's heart without differentiation, and we can never reach the one subject called knowledge without differentiation, because one subject called knowledge is having all the subjects intertwined together and delivering them as one content. Now, if we look at real life, no one is faced with a problem and then he says, oh, I'm going to use this lesson from my physics book or from my physics curriculum in order to solve it. There's nothing as such in real life. Even the pandemic proved it to us. We went into ethical, moral, and sometimes religious, scientific, and we used language to express ourselves in order to have all kinds of precautions. So in real life, there's nothing called physics targeted incident, language targeted incident, medical, or let's say science, or let's say history and so on. Everything is intertwined. So if I have to reach to the ultimate goal, the zenith, as we said, one subject called knowledge, which is one of the multi-layered curriculum layers, if I have to get there, then definitely there should be this kind of differentiation, because at the end of the day, I need to fulfill the horizontal integration for my education to be holistic. And in such a way, I am designing my content in a way where it hits and it entangles all the others. And my process itself will prove that I am delivering these different contents in different styles, different ways where my learner is accepting it. And thus, from the product, we come to see what is their own orientation. So if I limit my course only to one rigid subject, one rigid topic, and I eliminate the chance or the freedom for the kids to put in their own learning capabilities and abilities and preferences, then this is not called one subject called knowledge. It's not knowledge at all. It's one subject and it's rigid, and the kids will feel like this is not a safe environment for us. So I need to really cater to their needs. And this happens when I apply differentiation by emotion, which leads to a safe environment. And this safe environment, there I can really implement all these different content, processes, and products, targeting and intertwining everything else. Again, as we said, in real life, I don't target one problem or one event or one incident using one approach. I am actually involving everything there, bridging the gaps, closing the gaps between all these, making whatever is delivered inside the classroom or outside the classroom relate. Many times we're faced with such a situation. I have students who stood in front of me and said, "Miss, why should I learn functions in math when I will be a football player?" It took me forever to explain to him that we follow commentators or whatever it is who are analyzing a specific match. They follow the trajectory. It didn't make sense to a kid. But if I bring whatever I give in class to reality and make it look like without it, I cannot survive, because really without it, I cannot survive. That's the base of my knowledge. It has to be relevant to the students. This is the one subject called knowledge, where everything fits in with my differentiation styles and making it meaningful to the kid, how to implement it in real life. That's real life based learning. Otherwise, all my learning doesn't make any sense. So for me to get to the zenith of education by getting a holistic overall general entity, then I have to implement differentiation. Otherwise, it will be of very little use, as Mr. Fouad had already said.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if I've given you
very
enough
detailed
information about that.
Yeah, very detailed answer. Thank you, Ms. Aleen. Mr. Fouad, do you agree with Ms. Aleen in the structural analysis?
Frankly, I completely agree, 100%. And I really can't think of anything more to add to what she just said. So
I just took over everything.
Yeah, she basically covered everything. So
sorry.
Yes,
okay.
I agree and completely endorse everything she said about one subject called knowledge and differentiation.
Thank you, Mr. Fouad. And of course, we're having a lot of questions, Mr. Fouad and Ms. Aleen, in the Zoom chat box, and a lot of our educators attending today, they have a lot of questions. At the end of the webinar, in about 10-15 minutes, they will have all the time to ask those questions, and will all the time to answer all the questions in the Zoom chat box. My next question, Ms. Aleen, is for you. Can you share with us, Ms. Aleen, for you, Mr. Fouad, what role what role differentiation plays in the multi-layered curriculum, in your opinion?
Okay. Again, a reminder of what the multi-layered curriculum is and why did we even develop it and put it together. The multi-layered curriculum, again, is a model of a comprehensive and differentiated curriculum, a truly 21st century model of a curriculum. It's not a new curriculum. That is, it's not there to, let's say, be a substitute of, I don't know, the national curriculum of England or the American Common Core curriculum. No, it simply, the multi-layered curriculum builds on all that, but adds other elements,
I see,
what we call layers basically, to make the learners' learning experiences more holistic, more integrated, and more 21st century, really 21st century experience. So a reminder of what the multi-layered curriculum is. Again, I don't know why I'm having this issue.
give it some time, you know, IT sometimes. Yeah.
I apologize to everyone.
No problem.
It should appear. Okay. I'm really sorry.
If you want, I can share that, Mr. Fouad. It's okay with you?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone. I don't know what's wrong with my laptop.
I think connection issue. It happens.
Most probably.
Yeah.
Most probably.
Yeah, that's no problem. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Fouad.
Yes.
Everything there?
Yeah. If you can just please.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. So this is the multi-layered curriculum. This is the graphical representation, really, of the multi-layered curriculum. Again, I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again, that all these layers are of equal importance. We shouldn't think of any as being superior to the others or inferior. But again, as I said earlier, we usually start with the overt curriculum or the standards because the purpose is to build on what we already have in order to and make it more holistic. So the first layer in the multi-layered curriculum that I'm going to talk about and show to you how it is linked, or what the link is between it and differentiation, is the overt curriculum, standards basically. Well, any curriculum has standards, and those standards are based on different cognitive skills. Think of Bloom's taxonomy. That's what I mean by different cognitive skills. Second layer, IT integration, the SAMR model for integrating IT in education. Just a reminder that SAMR is an acronym that stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition, with redefinition being the most, I would say, really advanced, because it as the name suggests, redefinition, it requires redesigning the whole learning experience based on the advancement in technology that we have nowadays. And if you're going to redesign the whole learning process, then you have to differentiate. You don't have any other option. Next, the one subject called knowledge. I think Ms. Aleen spoke about it in a lot of details. And after the one subject called knowledge, yes, we just discussed it in details. The vertical integration. Okay, vertical integration and differentiation. Well, when it comes to vertical integration, we always need to think of the spiral approach. Sorry, Mr. John, if you can please. So yeah, the spiral approach. And what is the spiral approach? Well, think of scope and sequence. The scope and sequence for any subject. If you look at the scope and sequence, you will find certain skills, certain pieces of knowledge that are repeated from one year to another. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Well, in pedagogy, it's called the spiral approach, but the reason for that is that any new knowledge or any new skill that the student will should acquire has to be based on some previous knowledge. So we base everything that we want the students to learn on something they already know, and we build upon that and we add to it. And again, in this case, it's a must. Streams projects or streams education, 21st century. Again, this is the whole concept of the multi-layered curriculum stems from the notion that we need to integrate all the elements of the 21st century. Now, when we assign STEMS projects, students are assigned different projects in which they assume different roles. They go through different processes to produce, and eventually to produce different projects. If you just notice how many times I use the word different, so obviously it makes sense that, or it's obvious that we need to resort to differentiation. Next, the co-curricular and the extracurricular activities. Well, that is where the knowledge and the skills and the attitudes and the values that the students acquire in class, they get to master all of those by implementing them in an environment that is outside the classroom, in preparation for implementing them in real life. 21st century lifelong learners traits, which was the first thing I spoke about or discussed with you today. Those traits reflect diverse needs and abilities, interests, and so on of individual students. Diverse, different, hence differentiation. Classroom without borders. Well, perhaps this is the classroom without borders is basically when students would attend the sessions at different locations, whether in the school or outside the school. I strongly recommend our fellow educators attending today to go back to the webinar that was specifically about classroom without borders. It's really it's an ideal example of differentiation by environment, where the other pillars of differentiation can be used. I mean, if the session takes place outside the classroom, well, that means that you're already differentiated by environment. It should be easier for you to differentiate using, differentiate by content, emotions, and so on. Next, real life based education. Every student has his or her unique and different W5H questions to understand the world.
What can you tell us? What is this W5H? It's a new formula.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. These are the basic 6 questions that not just students, even we as adults, perhaps many times without even noticing it, we ask in order to understand something. And the questions that each human being asks are very different. So we have to differentiate because those questions are very different. Next, parent-school partnership. Well, unless parents understand and cooperate with us when it comes to differentiation, our efforts would be really in vain. A lot of parents might say, what is this differentiation thing? Why differentiation thing? Why is the facilitator teaching my kid in a way that is very different than the way I was taught at school? This is so unfamiliar to me. They might attribute that to the facilitators, perhaps lack of skills or lack of knowledge. So we have to not only involve the parents, we have to make sure they understand that differentiation is for the best of their kids, and we need to ask them to collaborate with us in order for differentiation to be effective. Goals of the educational authorities, well, these are usually put by, not usually, they're as the name, as the title suggests, they're put by the educational authorities. And these goals are usually, not usually, always, if I can say, they're bureaucratic goals. You don't expect students to easily be able to, or it won't be easy for us actually to integrate those educational goals into our facilitating learning environment. Therefore, we need to differentiate. Differentiation is needed to simplify the integration of these typically bureaucratic goals within the facilitating and learning environment. And last but not least, when we talk about local and international cultures and identities, international cultures, international identities, well, you have, I don't know, countless, perhaps, cultural identities and cultures in the world. So differentiation is the model of, and is a key to promoting cultural harmony. So yeah, I hope I answered your question, Mr. John, by relating each of the layers of the multi-layered curriculum to differentiation.
Very detailed answer, and that's why, as you said, in CC differentiation, we need to have a differentiated curriculum so that we go to a differentiated classroom, because as we said, you want to make the curriculum as an instinctive, as a natural process, not an artificial one, doing it once or twice a week and being happy doing it. And that's why the environment, all these infrastructural elements must be present. And the most important one is to have a multi-layered curriculum or something similar in which we tackle all the different aspects of the facilitating and learning environment. Thank you, Mr. Fouad. My last question is for Ms. Aleen. Ms. Aleen, can you share with us one or two real-life scenarios conveying the positive impact of differentiation by emotions for the students?
Actually, Mr. John, I would like to relate my humble experience here. Before I came to this country, I used to implement differentiation by emotion without me even noticing it. And I never knew that I could put a name to this kind of approach or strategy used until I came here, of course, and I started delving deeper into the differentiated styles and so on. But then I'll have to relate only like a couple of examples. I do have a lot, but these are ones that really stood up in my mind, or let's say they just wouldn't get diminished easily. Now, I'll start from the recent one to the past ones. Recently and up till today, this day, I had students that I started teaching in this country the moment I joined the first school I came here, which is in 2008. And I taught them when they were still in grade 2. And now they are in universities worldwide, not only here in the UAE, and I still get messages from them and calls from them seeking advice, seeking consultation, sharing their lives, their projects, everything else. So it's really interesting how at that point, at that stage, when I was still, let's say, I'm going to call myself naive in the field of differentiation, I did leave an impact just because instinctively I implemented differentiation by emotion, imitating a mother to her children. Now, this is recently, I still get, as I said, these calls and they ask me questions seeking feedback and criticism. And it's very lovely when they act upon the advice I give them or whatever we discuss together. It's really refreshing. Now, another example was like 2 years back, and I had an experience to teach a bunch of kids. Unfortunately, because of what they had been exposed to in previous years, they came to my class lacking basic knowledge in language, actually. So I couldn't blame them. It doesn't have to do anything with their mental capabilities. It's actually an educational system in the place that they used to be before. But what happened is that when we discussed in one of our reading projects, which was a content delivered during the reading week, which was an activity, they got to the point where I like to have productions at the end of every reading topic that we take, and then into it we add artistic styles, we add art, we add morals, we add ethics, we add some kind of science. Everything is there, like project-based learning. What was interesting is that we had a gallery walk for parents, and what caught my attention were these specific students that had come with these language barriers. They impressed me by holding their project, which was simply a comic strip on boards, but they did explain every single thing inside the comic strip, bringing into life that experience over there that happened in the story itself, linking it to national identity, culture, international cultures, morals, ethics, religion, right from wrong. They even expressed it in English, and they could barely speak. But again, it was impressive just because they loved. They understood that I appreciated everything they've done. So by differentiation, especially by emotions, it really left an impact in them. And I saw it, it was manifested in front of me. Even the parents were impressed. So this was an example like 2 years back. If I have to go back around 5 years ago, I had to deliver in one of my English lessons for grade 10 students, eulogy. Now, of course, the concept by itself was new, and we were discussing the eulogy of an American former president. So it really impressed them. And again, as I said, I like to go for productions at the end of any literary essay or text that I deliver. So the project was a writing project for them to come up with a eulogy about someone that they really loved and had passed away. Of course, they came up with leaders and some of their relatives, but some of them were really stumped. I don't want to write about this leader. I don't want to write about this person. And the person whom I love so much hasn't passed out yet or passed away yet. So I took the opportunity and I said, well, I'm giving you my permission to write a eulogy about me. And then here, of course, they were shocked because according to culture and whatever, this is not appropriate. You're still alive, miss. So how can we say that you're dead and then we have to compose a eulogy about you? Again, once I granted them the freedom to do it, and then that doesn't mean anything harm or bad. It's not bad luck for me. They were motivated to do the work. But again, what motivated them more was this. I told them, well, yes, I'm still alive, but nobody knows when I will die. And I would be so proud to have your eulogies about your teacher read on my tomb when the ceremony is performed. So even if my parents are still alive, they will be so proud because I left this impact on you, and I would come to know how you feel about me even when I'm alive before I become dead. So they were like, okay, she gave us the green light, and they really wrote interesting facts about me, positive things that I didn't know I had, or I wasn't aware that they noticed. So differentiation by emotions really left an impact. And one of them was so influenced by the way I presented specific styles that he came up with the eulogy in Shakespearean language. So that was like, wow, I was really, I ran out of words. I didn't know what to say. I even started shedding tears. So it's really interesting how you can access those people's emotions. As we said, their five senses read what we give them. And at the end of the day, they are a reflection of me. So whatever I show them as a facilitator of my traits, they are going to be seen there. They're my mirrors. So whatever I give them, they have to reflect back. And this is how they build their own traits as well. And this is what Mr. Fouad had already mentioned earlier. So we see without differentiation, I cannot get to win my students. So by breaking the ice, by building that rapport, by enhancing that relationship, everything falls into place. And I will go back to the traits of a facilitator. Mr. Fouad mentioned everything that caters to emotional needs first. And there was only one box that related to pedagogical knowledge. So yes, I have to be strongly established with my knowledge, but then it would make no sense if I don't win my students over. And thanks to the Lord, I have witnessed this, and I'm so proud with whoever is still in contact with me and whoever praises my own impact on their lives.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Humbly
Aleen.
speaking.
Really, it's very detailed. Two real life scenarios in which, again, that's why we are in education. It's a mission, and the moment we see it as a business, we're going to lose everything. We're going to lose our students. We're going to lose everything. That's why we need to make sure that we always approach education as a business, because as a mission, because it's not a business, and because we are the sacred missionary of the sacred mission of education. And today, for example, we are very happy. You see, for example, me is one of my happiest moments is to have all those educators all joining together and share with or share all together this information. You know, there's something you cannot explain. The moment I see a student after 20, 25 years, he's an ambassador, he's a minister, he's a doctor, he's an engineer, he's a movie director. That moment, for me, it's worth billions. It's worthless. It's not even billions of dollars, worthless. Because that moment for me is the joy of life. That's why we are the sacred missionaries of education. That's why, Ms. Aleen, today, students are asking why, how, what, when, who, and where. Today, students need to know, why do we have many separate subjects? And in life, we face major problems grouping many areas and many subjects of life. Today, students are bored in their classrooms where the four walls are destroying the creativity and innovation. Today, students and facilitators are trying to break the famous destructive wall of bureaucracy. Today, students must adore their facilitators to love and master their learning objectives. Today, students do not need teachers. Instead, they need facilitators facilitating for them through differentiation by emotion, the inquiry and acquisition of knowledge and skills. All those constraints and crucial challenges can be solved when we start to differentiate instinctively and simply by emotion. Let us, dear attendees, dear educators worldwide, reach our students' hearts to reach their minds. Thank you very much. And I'm going to just tell you about our upcoming webinar with our great educator, that with the demand of all attendees, educators worldwide, he is going to be here with us on November 27th again this year. International acclaimed experienced educator and workshop leader, Mr. Luc Powell. He is going to explain to us about fusion education, a new approach in education for 21st century lifelong learner. And on November 27th, 2021 at 11 a.m. Dubai time, 3 p.m. China time. And again, we thank Mr. Luc again for always being with us and supporting the sacred mission of education and being one of the great missionaries of education. So thank you very much, dear attendees today. Thank you, Huan Kwan Village, for always hosting educational webinars and being an educational hub. And special thanks to our great guest today, international education expert and workshop leaders, Ms. Aleen Nassim and Mr. Fouad Sila. And a special thanks to all our attendees who attended today.